Okay, so this is screencast number 4 Excel training session. Now in this Excel training session we will learn how to use Excel to draw graphs. Now when you're in the physics lab, almost in every lab you have to draw some graphs. And if you know how to use Excel for that, that can make your life much easier and your time more effective. Okay, so let's learn how to use Excel for graphing. Now here I have a pre-prepared table with raw data and the graph that is used, to represent that data graphically. So this data that you see here is actually the same data that you use to make a hand-drawn graph if you already had a hand-drawing graphing session. Now if you haven't had that yet, that doesn't really matter, because in this session we will use that data to make a graph using Excel only. Okay, so let's try to reproduce exactly the same graph that you see here. Now how do we start? First, let's go to the Insert menu, which is here. So Insert, and here you have a different kinds of graph options. Now the one that we need is called a scatter plot. Okay, so we click on Scatter, and we can choose the very first one with just the data points. Okay, the very simple one, Scatter, like that, and a blank window comes out. So if you click on that window with the right click, you can select data. Okay, so here it says select data. So let's click on select data, and here you can add data. Okay, so let's add data, add, and it tells you series X values, series Y values, and series name. Now let's first give it a name. So let's give name to our data series. Now the data that we will be plotting is this data here in this table. So let's call it raw data. Okay, so let's type in raw data. Okay, and then it says series X values. Okay, so we have to choose what we want to be on the X-axis. Okay, which values we want to have on the X-axis. So let's click on that icon here and select the area. Okay, we want on the X to have volume, that is this V. Okay, so I'm gonna click on that first cell and then drag it down like that. Okay, so I select this entire region as my X series. Then I click here again, and then I do the same thing but for the Y values. Okay, so I click on this icon here and I go to M, the mass. Again, I click on the first cell and drag it down like that, and now I've selected this region as my Y values. Okay, and I go back and click OK, and then click OK again, and this is what I get. Okay, so this is a very raw graph. It's not very tidy, but it already looks like a graph. Okay, so let's increase it a little bit, the size. Just as you increase any window in Windows, you can increase the window of that graph as well. Now, the first thing that you note is that on this original graph, you have grid lines, right? You have these grid lines which are blue and are dashed. So how do we change the grid lines? Now, this window for the graph has been selected. So it's selected. So let's go to Layout, which is here, Layout. And here there are lots of different icons that allow you to change the way the graph looks. Now what we want now is the grid lines. So we have this horizontal grid lines, but we don't have the vertical ones. So let's go to the grid lines here. And you have primary vertical grid lines. If you go there, this window pops up and you choose major grid lines, for example. Let's click on that, and there are your major grid lines. Now how do you change these major grid lines? How do you make them, for example, blue and dashed? Well, all you have to do is you select them like this, and then you make a right click, and then you go to Format Grid Lines. Okay, so Format Grid Lines, and you can change the color. For example, you can say solid line and change the color, for example, to blue, this one. And then you can choose the line style, and for example you can make it dashed. So if you go to dash type, you can choose dashed like this. You can also make it thicker, and as you do that you can see that the grid lines become thicker, but that doesn't look very nice. So let's go back to 0.75, which is good enough, and then you click close. Okay, you do the same thing with the horizontal grid lines. So let's select horizontal ones, then right click, format grid lines, color solid line, color blue, line style dashed, and the width is 0.75, so that's good enough. Close. Now also we notice that in the original graph the data points are represented as crosses. Okay, so generally when you do a laboratory, we expect you to have, the data points represented as crosses. Okay, now by default Excel is using this squares instead. So let's change that. Let's click on at least one of them like this, and then all of them are highlighted. Then you click on right click and you go to format data series. Okay, so click on format data series, and here you can change the marker options. Okay, so you go to marker options and you go to built-in and you select the type of marker that you want. Now we want a cross like this. Okay, but we want it to be a bit larger, so let's make it larger. For example 12. Okay, 12 size. And then you can change the color. At the moment it's blue and the grid lines are also blue, so that's not good. So let's make the marker color, say, black. Okay, so I go to line color, marker line color, solid line, and make it black like that. Okay, so now it's black. And then you can make it thicker a little bit. So let's go to marker line style and make the width, say, 2 or 1.5. 1.75 is good enough, and you go close. Okay, so now you have your data points in the form of crosses. Now another thing that you notice is that your axis here on the original graph is from 0 to 120. Here, however, by default it's been set to from 0 to 140. Let's say you don't want that 140. Let's say you just want from 0 to 120. How do you change that? Well, you go to axis, you select it like that, okay, just by clicking on it, and then make a right click, and then you go to format axis. Okay, and here you can change the minimum value and the maximum value. Okay, so my minimum value I want to be 0. Okay, so 0 fixed, and the maximum value also fixed, but I change the number to 120, for example, or say 130, whatever you want. So let's say 130. Okay, you click close, and that's what you get. So it's 130, it's just the last digit is not represented here. Now if you look at the x-axis, it's also different. So here it's from 0 to 140, so you want it to be 0 to 140 here as well. So let's click on that, then make a right click, format axis, fixed, minimum value is 0, maximum value is 140. So let's change that, close. And now you have from 0 to 140. Now let's go back to that axis edit menu. So right click, format axis. You may have noticed that here you can also change the major and minor units. Now sometimes that is also useful to know, because you can change the major unit to something smaller. For example, let's say make it fixed and let's make it 10. Okay, and let's see what happens. If you make it 10, then you will have a more fine axis. Okay, now it goes with an increment of 10. Sometimes for the analysis of the graph, that is even better, to have smaller increments. But when the increments are too small, then it becomes really hard to read the graph. So you have to find some kind of balance. Now let's go back to 20. Okay. So I select this format axis, and let's change the major unit back to 20. Okay, close. Like that. Now obviously you can change the title of the graph. So at the moment it says raw data, but I can change the title as I want. For example, if you just click on this and delete the raw data title and type in something different, for example, total mass versus volume, like that. Now, the next thing that is missing is that this axis, they have titles, right? This one says total mass and it has units, and this one is volume in centimeters cubed. So let's change that. Okay, so if you select this and then if you select the graph and then go to axis titles, which is here in the layout menu, okay, the axis title. You click on that and it says primary horizontal axis title, go to that, and title below axis, okay, like that. And you can type in whatever title you want. So in our case, we go into that box and we type in volume in parentheses centimeter 3 parentheses closed, and now let's raise this 3 to a subscript, so we select it, just that 3, right click, format, now we go to font and you make it a superscript like that. And so you have now volume measured in centimeter cube. Now you can do the same thing with the y-axis. So let's select the graph again. Let's go to titles, primary vertical, and there are different options. Let's say rotated title. If you click rotated title, then the title will appear like this. But there are different other options, like for example, if you prefer the title to be something like horizontal title like this, it will appear like that. So whichever one you prefer. So I'll go back to the rotated title, because I like that option more. So let's change now the title to total mass measured in grams, like that. Okay, so that's it. Now one more thing that is different is that you can see that the legend on this graph is below the graph itself. Here it's on a side, so we can change that as well. So if you select the graph again and go to the layout, you can go to the legend menu, okay, and choose a different option. At the moment it's on a side, on the right side, and we want it to be at the bottom. So we show legend at the bottom. Click on that, and now the legend is at the bottom. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty much it with the data points, and now we're moving to another thing which is known as the trend line. So you can see that there is this red line which is the best fit line. So it's the line which has the best approximation. So in the next screencast we will see how to use and how to show that trend line on a graph.